out, but we're going to get this done. So, trimming up the fretboard should be fairly simple enough. I have a cutter with a bearing on it, and that's going to follow along to the shape. And here we go. I'm going to give you a little so little by little. You don't want to take huge chunks, even though the bit is fine. It will cut through it like butter. I don't want to chip it. So I'm going to take little passes, give it a lot of time, like so. And because there's nothing supporting the back end to the heel, I'm not going to wrap that at all. That'll have to do by hand or trim down by hand. And always from the heel. Fretboard nicely trimmed up, gonna do the rest by hand. Now I have the fretboard nicely trimmed up, but it's still very uneven due to all the resin. So I need to get that evened out. It shouldn't be too much work, seeing as I've already radiused it before. So I'm gonna go back with a radius block. So this is a 16-inch radius, same as the fretboard before putting on the epoxy, and I got 320. So that should smooth this out pretty quick. Sure, I could go with a lower grit, but I don't want to take off all that much. I just want to get the radius back in there. And I'm not applying almost any pressure at all. I'm letting the sandpaper do all the work. All right, now that I have this radiused up, I'm just gonna check that everything looks about right. And yes, it does. All along the neck. Still gonna go back and do some more sanding in a little while, but first, I'm gonna get going with marking out the fret slots. The most important thing about this now is actually getting your center line accurate. Having a good pencil goes a long way to getting this done. And of course, having a good protractor. Go with it. Just a matter of connecting two lines. There we are, center line. Which is giving me a little bit of trouble seeing as there's the epoxy on top. Now, what I did notice was the fact that I was going to use the end of the fretboard here as a place to place my nut. But that becomes an issue because the nut is not as tall as the fretboard. So instead I'm going to cut a slot, kind of like a fender style, seeing as it is more or less a fender style nut in the first place. This makes a little bit more sense. Now, getting your fret slot positions marked out as accurately as possible is extremely important. So using a good book with a chart is always an option. I have one, but right now it's in storage. So yeah, it's Sunday, so I was feeling lazy and I didn't want to go get it. So instead, there's this very nifty website. I'm pretty sure there's a couple of different ones, but I always use this one. I'll put a link down in the description so you can check it out. But yeah, you can just put in your scale length, whatever you want to use, and then go from there, and it'll show you all the different positions for your slots. Now, first things first, I'm going to get the nut lined up. So that's my nut line, and that gives me a place to start. Easiest way I've found to go about this is getting yourself a nice long ruler with both inches and millimeters. So if you're using empirical, I'm not gonna judge you on that, but millimeter is definitely for the win right here. Now, that's personal preference on what you want to use. I just don't understand empirical measurements, so I go with millimeters because it makes sense to me, and I know that I can do it accurately. And also, if you're using the website, you can determine whether you want to have millimeters or inches. So I'm just going to use a bit of masking tape here to hold this ruler in place, right along the center line, like so. So now it won't move while we're marking out the positions. And it's going to be a fairly tedious process of just marking everything out along your center line. Alright, now once that's done, you can go back with the protractor and mark out the lines themselves. Make sure everything's nice and square. You actually want to score the lines. Now, the way that I do it is usually scoring it first with scoring it with a scalpel blade, like so, and then taking a bit of a thicker blade to open those up a little bit more. Now, the reason I do it like this is so that now I have better purchase for the saw. Helps the saw sit a little bit better. I don't know why I'm doing it the difficult way, because I can just do it this way. I'll show you again. And as you can see, I'm using the scalpel so that I have a lot of fingers as close, or I'm holding on to the blade with as many fingers as possible. That's just to make sure that it goes in a straight line. And of course, there's a way of, the more you have your blade facing up, the more it's prone to kind of go along the grain. If you have it facing a little bit more flatter down, you'll be able to score the line a little bit cleaner and a lot more straight. So yeah, just basically repeat this process for all the frets. And you should be good to start sawing soon. Alright, so next step is cutting the fret slots. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is put a little bit of masking tape on one side of the saw. Now this is going to give me basically the depth to cut to. There we are. And easy way I've found of doing this is basically starting on both edges and then joining up in the middle. Now, one thing I'm going to do straight away is clamp this neck down so it doesn't keep on moving while I'm doing this. There we are. Should make my life a hell of a lot easier. I'm using my finger here as well to kind of guide it. Guide the blade to stay square at all times. Now you'll notice that I'm also following the radius of the fretboard because that will ensure that I have the same depth all the way through. And again, I just need to repeat this process 21 more times. But fortunately, once again, this is pine, so it is going very quickly indeed. And yeah, this is a lovely PAX fret slotting saw. So this saw is actually meant for this purpose. The only thing I wish it had was a pistol grip, because this doesn't exactly give you the best ergonomic touch to the whole process. I feel like if it had a pistol grip, that would be a lot helpful. Alright, so my light went out, and that's a good point for me to stop filming. I'll finish up cutting the rest, and then come back to this in a bit. Alright, working on the volute. So what I usually tend to do when it comes to carving a neck in general, I'll do the final thickness of the neck on the 1st fret and the 12th fret. So I'm gonna get started on doing that. There's a whole bunch of tools that you can use for this job. There's different kinds of rasps, like I have here. Different kinds. This is gonna be very useful for doing the nut. This is good for hogging out a lot of material. This is I just like this one quite a lot. And then there are like saw rasps. I wish I had a Shinto saw rasp. This is kind of a cheap knockoff version of it. And these are very good for really hogging away material quite a bit. And if you have a good one, you'll get far pretty quick. But I don't. This is kind of cheap, and you can see that it's kind of flimsy. So I'm just going to keep on going with the rasps that I like to use to get rid of material. That's maybe a bit too fine, so. And key point is to have a really good workbench, solid workbench to work on. This still has some issues that I need to work out. See, it wobbles a bit, so it's not the greatest. But it will do for now. So what I'm doing essentially is I'm just doing kind of facets and eventually getting that to a nice round shape. Now technically I could just go like this to begin with, because it is very thick. I mean, I'm looking at, basically I want to have this thickness right here to be about 20, 21, and I'm at 30. So I have a lot of material to get rid of. I was playing it safe because it is pine, so, you know, there's that. I could use a spoke shave to whittle it down even more, because in general, I carve most of my necks, or, well, I do carve my necks with spoke shaves, because I like them. Yes, some people have said that this is a very Zen-like way of doing things. Perhaps not the quickest or fastest, but use the methods that you're most comfortable with. And because this is a multi-laminate, it seems like I have some cross grain there, and the table moves, which is not good at all, but I will try and work with what I got. Now, one of the key things you have to keep in mind that whenever you are carving a neck, that the edge of your fretboard stays square. So you can carve it all the way up until then, but then it does need to be flat and square on the fretboard edge. So try not to go over that line. Remember that placing your volute is fairly important, so keep in mind that your volute should be pretty much underneath the nut. Which is why in this case I'm moving it back a bit. I want to get this volute shaped up before I continue onwards. Now what I usually would do is do the first fret, then the 12th fret, and then conjoin the two with a spoke shave. But now, seeing as there's so much extra material to take away, I'm just going to make my life a little bit easier by taking away some with the spoke shave. And yeah, I'm basically pulling with the spoke shave, much like you would if you were carving a spoke on a wheel. Kind of makes you think where the name comes from, no? And again, thankfully this is pine, so it's actually making very quick work of this. Again, having a proper workbench with proper ways to hold onto your work would be far more ideal than my setup, but I have worked with worse. If you've watched my videos, you've seen me do this on a whole myriad of different kinds of work surfaces. I almost said workbenches, but that's not always the case. Seeing as I worked on windowsills and my computer desk and living room coffee table, living room floor, shower room, bedroom floor, yeah. Total DIY style building is what I'm getting at. You know, I might even just go ahead and carve the entire neck, or the length of neck, with the spoke shave. Gets the job done, and it's leaving a nice finish. Right. But I do have to get that thickness there first, because that will make the spoke shave part a lot easier. Because now if I'm doing it from, 38 or 35 or whatever this is, to here, is making a very big slope. Instead, if I already cut that down, it'll just be evening out the gap in between the two. Now, I do need to make a neck carving jig, which would just be a plank of wood this way and then to the floor. But that will have to come later, because I don't have time to build one for this guitar right now. Let's see, where are we now? Still got plenty to go. One thing must be said, it smells great in here now. Working with pine, that's one of the good things. Okay, where are we now? 29 to 27, all right. So I'll trim that down, and then because it's pine, I don't want to risk taking away too much material. So bridge the gap between the two, and then I'm gonna start really getting away, or taking away to the final depth. I know I'm going against the grain right now, but right now, just trying to get it thinned out. One thing you really want to avoid doing is getting a dip in the middle. All right, now what I need to do is I need to get that heel carve started so that I can continue to get the neck shape finalized. So turn this around. Sure there's nothing underneath. There we go. I'll show you as much as I can before the battery dies, and recharge the camera and pick up from where I will be at that point. That made no sense. Now, a good way to go about this would be to use a good chisel to get out a lot of the material. But yeah, let's have a look. This chisel doesn't seem to be all that sharp. Because believe it or not, I still don't have anything to sharpen with. Before I left Crimson, I didn't have time to sharpen all my tools. There were always sharp tools at hand. So, and in the couple of years that I've been back home, these have dulled out massively. Thank God this is pine.
Next up, now that I have the fretboard sealed off a little bit, and the reason why I did that is I'm going to glue in the frets, and sealing it up will actually give me a little bit of leeway in that I can wipe away the glue a little bit easier. Before putting in the frets, I'm just going to open them up with a triangular file. Don't need too much, because it is pine, it is soft material, but a couple of swipes just to open up those slots a little bit better. That'll actually help putting in the frets. Moving on to fretting, and this is going to be the loud part of doing things. Now I would have used another means of doing this. I would have used super glue, but I don't have any of that, so I'm just going to do Type-On. Clean it up so it is just in the slot. And the way that I do frets is I tap in both ends, and then I even it out from the middle. So that means the tangs are going in and to the side, which means they're not going to pull straight out. Because if I was just to bang it on like that, they're just going to go straight down and they might pop out. Let's do the next one. Keep this going up until we get all the frets in. Now you could cut these pieces of fret wire already into a good shape or the right size, but I found this way of doing things, I end up having a lot less waste because I'm not having to trim off the ends. And the reason why I'm using water and Type-Bond is because Type-On actually comes off with just water when it's wet. Yeah, water cleanup is what it says on the bottle. I had to check that it actually says that on the bottle before saying that it does. Now what that also is going to do is that when the glue dries inside the fret slot, it is going to solidify and make the neck or fill up those little gaps created by the fret slots. So I just see that as a win, really. And the reason I'm cleaning it up before putting in the fret is just it's so much easier than trying to clean up around a fret and ending up with a bunch of little paper rag pieces all over the place. Oh yeah, and underneath I actually have the radius block to give me support for the neck because it is already carved. Now what I didn't film was the entire sanding process because, well, that doesn't change. But the neck is now sanded to 240, waiting for the next part of what happens to the neck. This is one of the easiest fret jobs I've had to do. It's really easy. The frets are sinking in very quickly, not surprising because it's very soft wood. I have to say that usually I don't glue in my frets, but because of the pine build and what it is, I feel like this is probably a good approach to have just to be on the safe side. Don't hit your finger with a hammer. Tip of the day. I know, you probably never would have thought about it. Glad I warned you about that sort of thing. So ends first, then smoothing from the middle out and checking that it's well seated. By the looks of it, all these frets are sitting in very well. I do need to check what time it is, so I'm not doing it too late into the night. That's kind of the reason why I'm doing this so quickly, is because it is Friday evening, and I don't want to be too loud, too late into the night, but it's only about 7 o'clock, so we're fine. Next thing I know, there's going to be a neighbor knocking at my door, asking me what the hell I'm doing. Doubt it. That's the downside of living in a apartment building. Alright, that one gave me a little bit of trouble, admittedly. Oh, I don't think I have enough. Let's see. Let's hope. Hope for the best. Haha, I didn't have enough. Alright, there we have it. And I am going to do some cleanup and nip off all the excess. More on this side. Okay, there we are, and then I'm going to fix up the camera angle and move on to fret work. We're going to trim down the edges and get those bevels in there. So first things first, using a leveling file, I'm not going to talk over on top of this, using a leveling file just to get those flush. You can also hear the difference when you're sanding these down or filing these down on when you start hitting wood. Now this is also a good time to check if you have any fret ends that have lifted. Better address those now instead of later. Okay, one side filed down somewhat, still needs a bit of work. You can also do this with a leveling beam. There, that wasn't too much. I kind of usually like to use a bit of both. Here we go. Next up, I'm using a fret and beveling tool. So it's basically just a file that goes on an edge. One edge rests on the fretboard like so. And then the file is at an angle to get a bevel into your frets. There's also something that you can do with a leveling beam or a leveling file, but this is just the dedicated tool for the job. I might go ahead and just use this, or actually I might use this. I might lean it back a little bit more. Yeah, I'm gonna do majority first with this. All right, there we have it, folks. Nicely done. I think I'm gonna do the side dots next. That's gonna be fun. So I'm gonna get some tools ready for that, and I'll be back shortly.